Before we start, a shout out to our friends over at Zoom Care, where you can never sit in a doctor's office again, or hopefully never sit in a doctor's office again. One thing that we have learned in the pandemic is there's so much that we can do from our homes. And this is a perfect example. Zoom Care will get you taken care of from your couch. I actually used this a couple weeks ago, guys, and it is a fantastic service, if for no other reason than how much time it can save you. I mean, you normally go to the doctor's office, let's say it's a 20-minute drive there, then you got to sign up and register there, and then you got to wait in line. Then you see the doctor, then you drive home. I mean, at best, you're talking about an hour experience, but I would say probably hour and a half, 2 hour type of experience. With Zoom Care, you sign up, you pick a time, you show up on Zoom. The doctor is there right when the time slot starts, and you get to talk to a doctor, get a diagnosis, maybe get a prescription, whatever you may need, in what took me exactly 13 minutes. So, got to try out Zoom Care. You don't want to be in doctor's offices right now. And like I said, it'll save you a ton of time. Zoomcare.com. That's ZOOMCARE.com, and get a diagnosis while you're sitting in your living room.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. Two girls that Zach May, Sake at the bar. Three for Mr. B in that old trophy case. None folks to wait for, well, bring on the chase. Out on the field at Mile High, Broncos win is our desire. Coupled with Breck, brewing friendly, orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us, DNVR. We are DNVR.
We are DNVR, and we are presented by MSU Denver Online. MSUdenver.edu/online is where you can scope out all they have to offer. And you're going to want to see all they have to offer because we are talking about 750 total classes, 45 different hybrid programs online. There is so much for you to scope out at msudenver.edu/online. And like I always say, my favorite stat here, Denver students work twice as many hours as students attending any other Colorado institution. So if you're looking to keep your job and get your education, MSU Denver is the place for you. It's msudenver.edu/online.
My boy, Ryan, what's up? So pumped to be rolling with you. And I'm happier to be rolling with you on this podcast than I am on Madden, because you took me to school yesterday on Madden. It showed me a few things.
Yeah, I mean, it was only 42-14, nothing to hang your hat about.
And it was 14-14 at halftime.
Yeah, you had me sweating there for a second. You put together a couple of really nice drives to start the game. You were feeling good, looking good. And then my defense, decided to show their teeth a little bit.
Yeah, and Trey Lance showed up, and I think he just had a normal game. 400 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns. Pretty normal for him.
Yeah, I've always been a running team, and then I got kind of bored of that. So I decided to be a passing team this year. And Trey Lance off to a solid start, 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Yeah, that's not bad. And funny enough, one of those interceptions, courtesy of RK. And not just did you throw the pick, but RK was the one to pick him off.
Yeah, people who are confused by this, we were so deep into our Madden league now that we can't, no one knows who the realistic draft classes are anymore. So we added all of the players in the league into the draft class just as random draftable players.
And so my quarterback is named, of course, Zac Stevens, but Ryan's, and I like this. It's not R and then K. It's ARR first name and then last name KAY. It's perfect.
Yeah, he's a beast. He picked me off. I'll never forgive him. But I still got the win.
And I'm not surprised why you're a big Trey Lance guy in real life. I mean, you just ball out with him on Madden, so you're like, this guy is legit.
If Trey Lance is, I don't know, half as good in real life as he is in that Madden game, someone's going to get themselves a very, very good player. So speaking of the draft, Zach, we did a little draft of our own last week. And it was, of course, on Three Ring Circus. If you haven't been tuning into our Friday live shows, you guys are going to love them. And each week, or most weeks, we do a draft. 2 weeks ago, we did drafting all the available quarterbacks. And this week, we did drafting all the available non-quarterbacks. And it was such an interesting exercise because it left us so much happier than we were at the end of the quarterback draft, seeing just how many really solid players are available. And I think what's so interesting about it is the drop-off. There isn't a cliff, I guess, where you fall off, where you're saying, oh, man, after this, or maybe there is, but it's pretty late where you start to say, man, there's a big drop-off. I remember last year when we were talking about where the Broncos were picking, we said once you fall out of the top 10, there's a very different caliber of player available here.
Yeah.
The Broncos should be looking to trade up. Now, we never thought Jerry Jeudy was going to fall to number 15, and so the Broncos, ended up playing it right. But as we go back to that graphic there, Zach, you look at these names on here of all of the non-quarterbacks: Penei Sewell, Kyle Pitts, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Micah Parsons, Jamar Chase, Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain, Najee Harris, Rashawn Slater, Russo, J.C. Horn. And that is just about where the drop-off is. And then, of course, everyone loves JOK as, kind of that speedy coverage linebacker that the Broncos have been looking for so long. And we also know that 5 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 10. So let me just count here. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We see 13 non-quarterbacks that are very, very good players. Now, Zach, you are anti-wide receiver. You're saying Broncos, one position they can't select is wide receiver. And I think, while I don't want to go that far, I don't think the Broncos are going to select a wide receiver. So you take away the 3 wide receivers on this list, and that leaves you even still with 10 guys that I really think are all in the same category. Like, I just don't think there's that big of a drop-off between Penei Sewell and JOK. Now, JOK is a little bit, is I think being elevated in our minds a little bit because he's a need player. But the reason why we bring this up is because I have long been anti-trade back. I just get the best possible player you can get at the position you were selected to pick them. And I think I'm changing my opinion on that this year just because of the lack of drop-off. I think you can trade back to 12, 15, 16, and not really drop off in terms of the quality of player you're going to get.
You're 100% right. And Ryan, this was the realization I thought I was never, ever, ever going to have in my life. I'm not advocating for a trade back. Let's not take it too far and get too crazy right now. But a trade back for the right scenario would be okay. And our exercise, that draft board that you just showed, was exactly why, is because I realized, holy cow, if you're not getting a quarterback and you're sitting there at 9, let me make this very clear. If there's a quarterback there at 9, any of those top 5 guys, you take them. That's the pick. Anything else I think is ridiculous. But let's say all 5 of them are gone, which is very, very possible that that's the case. And you're sitting there at 9, and you can get a great offensive tackle in Penei Sewell or even Rashawn Slater. You can get a good cornerback. You can get, I think the wide receivers will be gone by then too. You can get a great defensive player. Well, at that point, you might as well trade back as far as you can within staying in this zone of getting one of these guys and pick up as much as you can. And I'm not so sure I'm advocating for trading back for a second or a third round pick. I'm advocating for trading back as far as you can to get as much as you can. And when I say that, I'm talking about a first round pick. So how far do you have to go in order to get a first round pick? And can we find a little sweet spot where you get a first round pick and you still get one of these players? So Ryan, I totally agree with you. I agree with there's 13 of those players on the board that I think you'd be very happy walking out of the first round with. And again, not saying quarterback is off the board. Well, you have to go back to right around pick number 20. And I think in order to get a first round pick for next year. And so we're saying 13 guys plus 5 with the quarterbacks. That's 18. So it doesn't look too good. But here's the thing, Ryan. I'm not giving the benefit of the doubt to the NFL. Some team is going to screw something up. A team's going to jump from the second round to mid-first round to pick Kellen Mond or something crazy like that. Najee Harris, I think we had him on the board, but ETN may go earlier as well. So a couple of teams are going to mess this up, where I think the sweet spot, Ryan, is 19 or 20. And we're talking about 2 teams right there, the Chicago Bears at 20 and the Washington football team at 19. That, yeah, Washington has Ryan Fitzpatrick, but unfortunately for Fitzpatrick, he is just the perfect guy to have when you also draft a quarterback in the first round. So I think we're looking at potentially, and I can't believe I'm saying this, excited, a great scenario for the Broncos to trade down.
Yeah, Zach, you bring up some great points. Really quick, I want to address someone in the comments. Drew's asking, where's the YouTube? We have a new temporary YouTube channel where we're broadcasting from right now. We're dealing with some issues with YouTube on some BS, for lack of a better term. Both Zach and I tweeted out the correct YouTube link, so that's probably the easiest way for you to find it. Just check out our Twitters. We both posted the link. Yes, Allie?
It's also, if you look up YouTube on YouTube, DNVR Sports, you'll find it instead of just DNVR.
DNVR Sports. If you type that into the search bar, you'll find us there. So that answers that. But Zach, I have some bad news for you.
Oh, no. You're ruining the only good thing going on this Monday. I mean, you beat me down in Madden yesterday. You beat me down again.
The only way that I think the Broncos are getting a first-round pick out of this trade back is if a very specific position is available at number 9. And you said it yourself. If there's one of these quarterbacks there at 9, you don't want to trade back. So now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because I think the sweet spot for the Broncos is they're sitting at 9 and there is a quarterback left, but it's not one that they want. So let's say the guy that they scouted and like the least is, for example, Mac Jones.
Of course.
If Mac Jones is there at 9 and you don't want it, like they've already decided, like he's not our guy. We don't think he's the quarterback of the future. Now you are in a great position. Now the question would be if, I don't know, the team I like to trade up here is New England.
Yeah, at 15, right?
Right. I'm wondering though, like why they didn't try to jump up earlier, but for whatever reason, maybe they just couldn't get it done. This is where I think you can get a first round pick because there's a quarterback on the board and only move back 7 or 6 slots. That I think is the dream scenario, but you also have to live with the idea that you might have just given the Patriots their reload and get ready to go for the future again.
And I know you wouldn't be scared of Mac teaming up with Bill Belichick, but there's a lot of reason to think that could be very scary with how much intel Bill Belichick could have on Mac Jones. He'd obviously get the Nick Saban sign off. And so, Ryan, would you be okay with that? And let's say it is Mac Jones right there. Do you like that?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. And you're right. It does come down to exactly what you think of Mac Jones. And if the Broncos don't like Mac, this is a perfect scenario. This is a perfect scenario because then you're not even talking about going down to 20 and just crossing your fingers that one team or two teams kind of mess up those top 18 picks in order to have someone fall for you. Then you're landing. Really, you'll probably have a few choices there of guys that you absolutely love. And also, I think the Patriots are going to be a playoff team this year or competing for it just because of how much they've rebuilt their, of course I do, because of how much they've rebuilt their roster. But Ryan, I mean, even as I love Mac, it's not crazy to say that a rookie's going to come in and struggle this year. And then you're looking at a top 10 pick from the Patriots. Let's say you do better than last year. So let's say the Broncos are picking 17 next year. And I think that's very realistic. And the Patriots, let's say they get the 9th pick. Then holy cow, let's say you made the playoffs this year or you got the 17th pick because your defense was so good. Well, there you go. And you need a quarterback 17-10 or 17-9 next year. That'll get you in the top 5, and that'll get you not quarterback 1, but it'll get you at least quarterback 3 and a normal draft quarterback 2. And there you go. All you did was move back 6 spots this year. You got another really good defensive players, probably something like that. And holy cow, you are feeling great because you know what? There's no mortgaging the future to go get your quarterback next year. It's just moving 1 first-round pick away.
So here's my question for you. The Broncos are on the board. Mac Jones is available. Again, they have decided they don't want him. Not their guy. You have let's see, who's a good example here. Man, there's not really that many good options here before the Patriots. Let's just say the Vikings are there. They are trying to trade up for Mac Jones, and the Patriots are trying to trade up for Mac Jones.
So we're talking picks 14 and 15.
Right. The Vikings are not offering a first-round pick, but they are offering you a healthy stable of picks. And the Patriots are offering a first-round pick. So you get to you have the fate of Mac Jones in your hands. Is it more about you, where you're saying, you know what? We want number 50, we want that future first, or is it more about them where you're saying we're not dealing with the Patriots, we don't want to give the Patriots Mac Jones, and we and we want him to go into the NFC?
You can't play with scare money, Ryan. You're trading Mac Jones for the Patriots and saying, "Oh gosh, this is potentially going to be bad," but we're going to get that first-round pick back next year. You absolutely do that. And I think a realistic scenario here is a potential trade with the Vikings. And Ryan, we're talking about a 2nd and a 3rd-round pick that you could get from them. Still, no, I don't want that. I know future picks aren't as valuable technically, but a first-round pick is always going to be so valuable. And then, Ryan, then you can really sell Drew Lock for this year because you say, we have a very legitimate plan if Drew Lock doesn't work out. And look, probably not winning the Super Bowl this year anyways, but might as well see if Drew is the guy. You bring in some sort of hedge, but then you're feeling really good. You have a great fallback plan if Drew doesn't work.
Yeah, this is the reason why you have to take the deal with the Patriots, in my opinion, is because you have to trust your own evaluation of Mac Jones, right? You've already decided he's not a franchise guy. That's why you're not. That's why you're willing to trade this pick in the first place. So you can't be afraid to trade him to the Patriots. Otherwise, that means you don't trust your evaluation of him,
and so
or you don't trust your coaching staff.
And speaking of your evaluation of him, Ryan, specifically Mac Jones, because he is the guy that could fall that some teams may love and some teams may be willing to pass up on. I think this is a very realistic scenario. My guy, Liam Benini asks, what do you guys think Mac Jones' ceiling is? And you said something interesting. You said franchise guy. Do you think Mac Jones is a franchise type quarterback? Not elite, but franchise.
So draw the line for me on a franchise quarterback in the NFL right now. Like,
I think it's 10 to 12, like a top 10 to 12 guy.
Is Kirk Cousins a franchise quarterback?
I think he's right on the edge.
I think that Kirk Cousins is Mac Jones' ceiling. I shouldn't say ceiling. I hate that word.
Oh man.
I think that if things work out really well for Mac Jones, he's going to be Kirk Cousins. Now, like I said, I hate the word ceiling because he could be the GOAT for, like what were people saying was Tom Brady's ceiling before he came into the NFL. So that's where I think he falls in a good situation. Not the single best situation, but he goes to a good place. He pans out. He develops. He gets time to learn. I think there's going to be a big learning curve for him that requires patience from an organization because it's not going to be as easy for him as it was at Alabama. So I think that, I guess to answer your question, I think that in most simulations that play out, he does not become a franchise quarterback.
Okay, and then you don't feel comfortable picking him at the top 10, especially if you can pick up another first-round pick. And Ryan, I'm curious if there's any scenario where I can have my cake and eat it too. And what I'm talking about is move back to 20, pick up a first-round pick, move back to 19, pick up a first-round pick, but you don't have to give up the opportunity to get a quarterback. And this happened a couple of years ago where the Broncos moved from 10 to 20. Now, they didn't get a first-round pick back, but someone fell in love with the defensive player. There's a chance that the board this year works out where the Broncos get the best defensive player on the board at 9. Would anyone be in that conversation to jump the Broncos and trade with the Broncos from a 20 or something in order to give up a first-round pick in order to get the number 1 defensive player?
Man, most people don't even know who the number 1 defensive player is. Who is it in your eyes?
Oh, man. In terms of talent, probably Micah Parsons, but that's a guy who gets killed a lot for his character issues. So I don't think he'll be the number 1 defensive player in a lot of people's eyes. And then the thing is, if we talk cornerback, well, there's kind of 3 that are first-round grades right there. So that kind of hurts the value of one of those guys, right?
Yep.
And then who else are we talking about?
Russo, I think that, people are always desperate for pass rushing. So that could maybe be the guy. He also just showed to be an athletic freak at his pro day. So maybe it's him, but that's the problem. Is there isn't a consensus best defensive player on the board. It's crazy to think that we could actually have an entire top 10 of offensive players. And I actually, if given the opportunity to bet on it, I would, because I just think that there's hesitation with every single defensive player that I think if it's not a team that wants an offensive player, like for example, the Broncos might be saying we don't really want an offensive player. I think they're going to be very willing to trade back. And so you're going to have, these wide receivers. As soon as one of those guys goes, there's going to be a little bit of extra desperation to get up there that I think you might be able to sit back. You might be able to trade back 2 or 3 spots just so someone can make sure they get Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith after Jamar Chase goes off the board. So I don't think teams are going to be trading up for defensive players at all until maybe the back end of the first round where, a guy we've mentioned, JOK, is sitting there and a team who's at 26 wants to trade up to 19 to make sure they get him.
So, Ryan, I have an offer for you. The phone's ringing, and it's the LA Chargers at 13. They want to pair. Well, you assume they want Jalen Waddle because he's there. They're not going to give you a first-round pick because it's only moving back to 13. Are you willing to deal with them to give Justin Herbert a playmaker?
Hell no. Hell no.
Yeah, in that case, there's going to have to be a huge divisional premium that they're going to pay. And I don't think that they're going to want to pay it. I think they'll wait until 10 when Dallas is on the clock and go to that route as well. So I imagine if your answer was hell no about the Chargers, what's it going to be when the Raiders call you up at 17?
I mean, the Raiders can't draft a wide receiver to save their lives. So,
True.
Maybe you just say, but why? I guess they could still use some wide receiver help. Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to give a first-round pick to make that jump. So if they want to trade a first-round pick to draft a wide receiver, then I'll let them do it.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to fleece themselves, you absolutely take advantage of that.
Yeah, but no, you're definitely not dealing with the Chargers, and you're hoping that no one does, or you're actively trying to make a trade with a team that wants to pick whoever they want.
Right, exactly. You give a little non-division discount, actually.
Right, to your old friend. No, not the Vikings. Who else is around?
Wait, why not the Vikings?
Well, I don't think they need a wide receiver.
Oh, right, exactly. Arizona, holy cow, could you imagine?
Yeah, that would be great. But yeah, I mean, you generally don't want to deal with teams in your division, and I just think the Broncos are going to have some opportunities here to trade back. And the reason why I think this is an important conversation to have today is because I think it's going to happen. It just makes way too much sense to me, unless they trade up. Trade up is definitely on the board as well. And someone in the comments mentioned Atlanta. If Atlanta wants to move back and you have an opportunity to move up and you like the guy that's there, then that is, like we always say, at 9, you hope this is the last time you're this close to number 4. And whatever you have to give up is going to be less than you have to give up next year when you're at 14 or 17 or 20. So you're thinking, okay, well, we really like Justin Fields. He's sitting there at number 4, and this is the lowest price we'll ever have to pay to get up to number 4. Then it's definitely something you should consider. Not to mention, I'm not a fan of the quarterback class next year. Now, I'm sure by this time next year, I'll be telling you about why Spencer Rattler is the next big thing. But right now, it doesn't profile as a very, very good quarterback class. And what's funny is I remember saying this exact same thing, unfortunately, the year before Drew Lock came out. And Drew Lock was literally the example of the player that I said. I was like, look, you're looking at Lamar Jackson this year in the first round as the last quarterback on the board, or you're looking at someone like Drew Lock next year. And as much as I ended up liking Drew Lock, I definitely liked Lamar Jackson more. So that's how I feel about this class. Is there's not going to be a fourth quarterback on the board next year that is anything like Justin Fields.
No, I'm right there with you. And Ryan, I know George Payton wasn't here when the Broncos drafted Bradley Chubb instead of a quarterback, but I hope John Elway maybe says, let's learn from my own, let's not call them mistakes because I don't think John would ever call it that, but let's just learn what we should have done there, because that was supposed to be the pick that the Broncos, that was the best pick they were going to have in 2 decades, right? And it still looks like it, but 9 is again in that ballpark right there. So if Lance is there at 4, let's say San Francisco makes the crazy decision to draft Mac Jones. A lot of people would say that's crazy. And Lance is there at 4, Ryan, you trade up to go get Lance. You see what I did there? You trade up.
Trey up. At number, you said at number 4?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, or Fields, right? Both of them are on the board in this scenario.
Both of them. Wait. Would there be a discussion for you on which one it is? I feel like you would be a Lance guy all the way.
Oh gosh, it just goes back. I mean, I've had this conversation, and I said it last week. I said you're going to hear me say this a lot, but I just don't trust the Broncos coaching staff with either of those guys. And so maybe I could be convinced into going Justin Fields because he's less of a project. But I really love Trey Lance, and I think that trying not to say the word ceiling anymore. His potential is off the freaking charts. And I just, it always comes with the caveat of in the right situation. And it kills me to say it. I just don't think Denver's the right situation. Whereas Justin Fields, like all quarterbacks coming out of college, is also situation based. He's definitely more ready to go, less of a project than Trey Lance. So, for Trey, it's going to be a situation where someone needs to build an offense around his strengths. And if Pat Shurmur can't even figure out how to get Phillip Lindsay involved correctly at running back, how am I supposed to believe he can build a whole offense around Trey Lance's strengths? The evidence that I have tells me that he's more interested about trying to fit a player into what he wants to do than fit what he wants to do to the players. And I think it's the worst way to go about things. I think it caused Drew Lock to regress last year. And so I just, like, as much as I personally like Trey Lance, I don't know if I can say that I want the Broncos to pick him.
Yeah, big Pat Shurmur guy here who I'm talking to right now, clearly. And also, Ryan, to go along with that, George Paton has built a team that can be competitive. Not competitive for the playoffs, probably, but competitive right now. Trey Lance is definitely the biggest project among these top 5 quarterbacks. Justin Fields, we just saw him playing at the highest stage of college football and was putting his whole heart on the line for that game. And so he's a guy that you could convince yourself you can make the playoffs with this year as a rookie. So you should not look at a quarterback and who you're drafting based on 1 year and trying to compete with them as a rookie. You shouldn't, but you can put that in the equation. If you hope that they're here for 15 years, that's 1/15 of the puzzle right there.
It's a good point. Yeah, I mean, and it's hard to envision a scenario where you're saying, like, we think this guy can get us to the playoffs this year, but we like this other guy better. Like, I don't know. I don't see the Broncos saying, like, we think Justin Fields can get us to the playoffs this year, but we think Trey Lance is going to be the better quarterback in 5 years.
Right.
It just, I don't know. Maybe people do have those conversations, but it's like, if you think a rookie is good enough to get you to the playoffs, you think that guy is a beast.
So we have Tomlinson coming in the comment section and says a rookie will not beat Drew Lock out. I don't know if it's even going to be a competition at that point. We know there's going to be a competition if it's Sam Darnold, if it's Gardner Minshew, if it's Nick Foles. There's going to be a competition there. If you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, if it's Trey Lance and they say we need him to develop, they may say just straight up Drew Lock is the starter. And there's no competition here because Trey is going to take a full year off. But if they give any opening for a rookie to compete, it's not a competition. The rookie's going to be the quarterback, at least should be. To me, it doesn't make sense to use a first-round pick on a guy and then have your second-round pick who you are not convinced on win the job.
Yeah. If you draft a first-round quarterback, they are your quarterback. And I think probably what would happen is the Broncos would be looking to trade Drew Lock. Yeah. And so, it might happen in short order where you draft Justin Fields or Trey Lance at number 4, you trade it up for him. And then you are trying to recoup the second-round pick that you used on Drew Lock a couple of years ago right away. You're trying to trade him during the draft for another second-round pick in that draft. That would probably be the plan A. Now, you can make the case of why would you do that? You already you have a cheap backup or a potential starter in Drew Lock, and you want as many bullets in the chamber, for lack of a better phrase, at quarterback as you possibly can. Yeah, you can make that case too. But a lot of times, remember that's what we were saying about Trevor Siemian, and then the Broncos did anything they could to get rid of him, and we're like, why'd they do that? They had a cheap guy who's a perfect backup, but it's like a symbolism thing, right? They don't want division in the locker room. They don't want some guys taking Team Drew. Some guys are taking Team Trey. Like, it's just not good. You want there to be a very clear message of, we're starting a new era. This is our quarterback. Get to know him. Get to like him.
All right, we're gonna force him down your throat until you really like him. And Ryan, a team that just jumps to mind when we're thinking about a possible mid-draft trade is the Detroit Lions. They were interested in acquiring Drew during the time where they were moving Matthew Stafford. Obviously, you're not going to get a first for Drew. And if you could get your second back for Drew, if you get a second from the Lions, that would be great. But maybe even a third you'd feel pretty good about. And the Lions, why they'd be willing to do that, they're sold on Jared Goff for this year, but I think they probably aren't sold on him being their franchise guy for the next 10 years. So you get another cheap quarterback in there who's clearly the backup this year, can learn under Jared Goff for a year. Drew Lock's very talented, and that would make sense. And also, they just got 2 first-round picks for Matthew Stafford, so they could give up a third and feel comfortable.
That's a very good point. And it would be an interesting move for them to kind of roll the dice on Drew. Jared Goff is a weird quarterback to have, in my opinion. I don't know like what their thought process is on having Jared Goff. But I think Drew would have a chance, maybe even have a chance to compete there. So the last question I want to ask on this topic is, let's say you don't want to trade up to 4. You're not sold enough to trade up to, well, to me, I'll answer the question before I hand it to you, but to me, if you're not willing to trade up to 4 for a guy, don't draft him at quarterback. Like,
it goes back to our Drew Lock conversation after day 1 of the draft, and they passed on him.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you're seeing exactly that scenario play out, right? John Elway really liked Drew Lock. We know that. And for whatever reason, wasn't convinced on him to take him at 10. Wasn't convinced enough on him to take him at 23 or whatever it was they traded back to. Was it 20?
20, yep.
Okay, 20. And so then you still took him because he was there, and we loved the move at the time. But the reasons why you didn't want him at 10 are now, showing themselves. We are going into year 3 with Drew Lock, and the Broncos very clearly are not sold on him as the future.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so maybe the ideal scenario is you love a guy at 4, but some team just does not let you get ahead of him. Or maybe the Falcons just say straight up, we're not trading this no matter what because we love Kyle Pitts. And then it goes on to the Cincinnati Bengals, and they say, we are not trading this pick at all because we are getting Joe Burrow, his guy, Jamar Chase, wide receiver. And then the 6th pick comes around, and the Dolphins say, we've already moved back. We're not moving back again. We are staying here to get Tua, his guy, and Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith. And then the 7th pick rolls around, and this is the first opportunity to truly make a move. And heck, Ryan, maybe the deal is 9 and Drew Lock in order to move up to 7. And I mean, that would just be something else. One thing that you may have to do, though, let's say this scenario unfolds, which would be great, because then you're not saying ever, well, we didn't love this guy. We just waited for him to fall. You can say, we tried trading up, but no one would move with us. You have to get in front of the Carolina Panthers. And if it falls this way, though, this is the perfect scenario, because I think the most you're giving up to go from 9 to 7 is a 2nd-round pick, and that's if like the bidding gets crazy with the Panthers. You could give up a 3rd, maybe a 4th and a 5th in order to go from 9 to 7. That would be huge, but you got to jump the Panthers, because since the end of the season, they've been saying any quarterback but Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah. So, but in this scenario that you just made up, the Broncos might actually be in a really advantageous position, because the Lions are on the board. There's 2 picks in front of you, and there's 2 quarterbacks left. Both Trey Lance and Justin Fields are still on the board. So maybe the Broncos like both of those guys, and they're saying, yeah, whatever one the Panthers don't want, we'll take the other guy. Now, again, I would much rather you be super convicted about one guy and say, like, we have to get over the Panthers. But also, or maybe they have intel. Look, the Panthers love Trey Lance. We love Justin Fields. So, let's let the Panthers trade up with the Lions, just, for no reason. And then we'll wait until after the Lions pick. Although,
or do you do a leapfrog there and the Panthers trade up with the Lions, and then you trade up with the Lions?
Or the only thing that you worry about there, I guess, is that the Panthers or the Lions trade back with the Panthers and then trade back again with another team in front of you. So I guess you are still trying to get up. I don't know. It seems like you're going to have to get into the top 5, honestly. I really, and I don't know if this is an every year thing. I don't think so. It really feels like to me that this is going to be 5 quarterbacks in the top 5.
Man, that would be something else. That would be so much fun, and it would involve multiple trades going if that happens. And that's never happened before, and it could happen here, especially because of how big the drop off is between the 5th quarterback and the 6th quarterback. I really haven't realistically seen anyone put anyone above a Mac Jones or anything. It seems like the top 5 is pretty darn set, but I mean, thinking about it, it's not the craziest scenario to see that the Broncos or that any team wouldn't be able to trade with Atlanta at 4. They may say, we're absolutely not moving. The Bengals may say, we're absolutely not moving because of the connection there. And then also the Dolphins, because they've already moved. And that would almost be an ideal scenario for the Broncos.
Yeah. The Broncos are in a great position because, as much as we talk about quarterback, I still believe in Drew Lock. I think Drew Lock, if given this year, is going to play a lot better than people think he's going to. But at the same time, I also am, like I said, where I was, the year that Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and all those guys got drafted, where, look, man, the class is not going to be this good next year. And so if it doesn't work out with Drew Lock, which absolutely is on the table, no one can act like it's not, then you're going to be in a worse position than you even are right now, where you have uncertainty at quarterback, because you have uncertainty at quarterback and what looks to be not nearly as strong of a draft class. So, one thing that I didn't like about John Elway's tenure at GM is I never felt like he was on top of that type of thing. I felt like he was very 1 year at a time type of GM. And I just really think that you have to be aware of all of these things. You have to be aware of the fact that you're hoping to never be at 9 again. You have to be aware of the fact that next year's quarterback class isn't as strong. And you have to be aware of the fact that every year that you don't figure out the quarterback, it really sets you back 2 years. So I think George Paton is in a nice position where he can be patient and not have to force anything, but is also very aware of the repercussions if you don't take a quarterback this year, it doesn't work out with Drew Lock, and you're back to right where you are now, or even further back, really, because at least right now you still have hope with Drew than you are right now.
And another reason why just quarterback makes even more sense is the positions that you could take at 9 right now match up with your strengths on your team already. Could you use Penei Sewell at right tackle? Yeah, you absolutely could, but you don't need a left tackle, which he truly is. Who knows if there's a need at right tackle, right? I mean, that's the biggest question mark on this team outside of quarterback. And then also cornerback is extremely strong at 9. You don't need cornerback. Wide receiver, extremely strong at 9. They don't need a wide receiver. So it just makes so much sense to just take that swing if one of those guys are there.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the more I talk about it, the more it sounds good, unless you just aren't in love with one of those guys. And if you aren't, then don't force it, because you will, most of the time you end up regretting it. I think you'd probably have the perfect example is Paxton Lynch. The Broncos didn't love Paxton Lynch. They just knew they needed a quarterback, and he was there, and they said, okay, well, might as well take a shot. And it failed about just as miserably as it could possibly have failed. So you need to be in love, or else you will end up kicking yourself. And I guess if you're a Broncos fan, you kind of hope that they love one, right? You hope that George Paton is looking at Trey Lance and saying, like, this guy is going to be special. I just know it. Like that makes you feel good. And maybe he thinks that he can have a talk with Pat Shurmur and teach him, or maybe he thinks that he can get Mike Shula to pull out his old Cam Newton tricks from Carolina and, get Trey Lance started.
I love it. I love it. And there's so many good scenarios for the Broncos here. And you hope that and Brian, maybe we find out that the Broncos love Trey Lance so much that the Falcons say, no, we're not trading the 4th overall pick. We want Kyle Pitts. And Pat says, and George says, nope, I don't care. We're going to make this deal happen. And that just shows you how much he loves him.
Yep, exactly. It's gonna be really interesting. Going to be really interesting to see what happens here. And I said it when the Broncos hired George Paton. My favorite thing about this is I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know what his leanings are. I don't know what his favorite type of quarterback is. We have some hints from the quarterbacks that they went after in Minnesota, and they aren't particularly good hints. But there's no guarantees that those were his decisions. And maybe he was pounding the table to go get Patrick Mahomes one year that we just don't know about it. Like there's all sorts of scenarios that happen behind the scenes that we don't know about. So going to be really interesting to follow. I think that wraps it up for us on the live side of things, but we're going to move over to the podcast side of things. Plenty of more discussion there. And of course, if you are a DNVR member, you can have all of your questions answered on the podcast side of things. That's what we're going to do now, is answer the questions from the people. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, hit us with a like, hit us with a subscribe. You can sign up for alerts too. We appreciate all of you guys for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later.